I'm Nick Wallace, and I've come to Glasgow to uncover just why this city has the reputation as the most violent in the United Kingdom.
We see people carry swords in the west of Scotland.
Swords? I want to discover why so many young men here are arming themselves with knives.
Sometimes many of them carry knives for their own protection. And if they go out there without any form of protection, then they can easily become a victim.
The gang's almost like an urban paramilitary organisation.
You bring a child up in a war zone, you'll create a warrior.
You kill for boredom, you kill for fun.
I look at the desperate legacy left for the victims of violent knife attacks. Tell me where the knife went in.
That little hole that did all the damage, which paralysed me from the neck down.
He'd been stabbed 31 times, his heart was halved in two, so he didn't stand a chance. God, human beings shouldn't be doing that to other people.
And investigate how the community is trying to tackle the violence on Glasgow's streets.
So what you're saying is things are going to get worse?
Your 8-year-old kid of today is your 6 years' time is your 14-year-old problem of tomorrow.
Glasgow, Scotland's largest city and home to a population of close to 600,000 people. A former European city of culture, it's famed for its architecture, flourishing art scene, and of course, its thriving nightlife. But over the years, Glasgow's developed another, more disturbing reputation, one for extreme violence. It's a reputation that's backed up by some staggering statistics. More people are killed here, and more violent crime is committed per head of population than anywhere else in the country. The city's long been infamous for its street gangs, groups of young people bound together by their geographical territories. It's a violent culture that helped leave Glasgow with a murder rate double the national average.
You have to be tough, to be able to survive in the streets in Glasgow. Culturally, there's always been the propensity towards violence, and a fighting culture of honour.
And the weapon of choice is often a knife. Many believe today's problems are deep-rooted in Scotland's turbulent history. Glasgow's infamous razor gangs of the 1920s and 30s gave birth to an obsession with bladed weapons, which the city has found hard to shake.
With weapons like these, 5 teenage gangs of about 1,000 boys aged only between 14 and 17 have terrorised Glasgow for the past 10 years.
Serious attacks in Glasgow increased to such a level that in 2005, the city was named the murder capital of Western Europe.
If you have a child born into a home where there is already violence and aggression, then what will happen is you bring a child up in a war zone, you'll create a warrior.
Over the years, Strathclyde police have looked at different ways of tackling the problems that have led to the city's youths arming themselves with seemingly deadly intent. But knife amnesties and tougher sentences have yet to cure the root causes of Glasgow's gang culture.
So if you're in a group and all the peers that you know carry knives, you're likely to do that. If all the peers that you work with or play with or socialise with get into fights and drink, that's what you'll do. It's not quite as simple as saying it's like the Scots are like that. It's not quite as simple as that. Because I'm sure if it were, we could probably have switched the switch and fixed it a long time ago.
In Glasgow's East End is the suburb of Easterhouse. It's an area of the city that has a violent legacy of knife crime.
If you pick the East End of Glasgow, which is where we have the highest density of deprived areas, we had gangs. We had loads of gangs. Dozens upon dozens of gangs. Hundreds of young men involved in recreational violence. They weren't organised criminal groups, but they were territorial, and they fought over, this is my bit, no your bit. They were obsessed by respect. You said that about me, they did that, they would fight all the time.
It's a life that Alex Richardson knows only too well.
The kids get 2 choices. Either I stay away from the gangs, don't get involved, and I could become the victim one day, be seriously injured or worse. Or I join the gang, safety in numbers, and I become a perpetrator one day, and I'm banged up in the neck.
You were brought up not that far away from here, were you?
Yep, I grew up just over there. It's all modern housing now. 1960 my family moved up here when I was only like a couple of months old, when we were decanting from the inner city.
Alex's family, like thousands of others, were moved from Glasgow's inner city slums to greenfield estates on the outskirts of the city. Their old homes destroyed, the intention was to offer residents a better life as part of the city's regeneration project.
People had TB and every other kind of thing in the slums. So of course there was a mad rush for new housing, and there was no community facilities whatsoever built when out each areas where Easter House was built. So hence through boredom was where you had the geographical gang boundaries drawn up.
With few distractions, it wasn't long before the gangs would turn to violence.
You know, the kids from that area, that was their patch, this was your patch. We used to protect that field there, which was your kind of wee bit of turf. So you would fight our territorial.
How old were you when you first got involved in the gangs?
I suppose I was probably my first gang fight at 4 or 5 year old, and I didn't know it because we thought that was how you played, to be honest. And I didn't know the inauguration at the time was to sit you on top of these big jaggy nettles. You know, and a lot of kids would cry, but I was too angry to cry, so they nicknamed me Iron Arse. So they always remember I'm shouting Iron Arse, Iron Arse. That was my first day at the office, and that was my first nickname.
Many years later, in an effort to show the authorities the extent of the problem, Alex drew a map showing how many gangs were operating in just his small part of Glasgow.
I mean, every man in the dug that lived in Easter House in those days could identify with gang territorial boundaries.
What are the names of some of these gangs?
RYT, Rockazy Young Team, your Provi Rebels, that was PAK, PAK, Punch and Kill.
People living in Easter House did not refer to the community where they lived by its real name. They would talk about, rather than saying they live in East Hall, you know, they would talk about, oh, I live in the Skinheads, you know.
The police had a look at the map 10 years ago. They went on to drop a citywide one. I think it was like 180 turfs.
With so many different gangs operating across the city, the introduction of drugs on Glasgow's streets would change the landscape once more. Drugs meant gangs were no longer fighting for just territory, they were now competing for profit.
By 1986, you had a massive drug problem on top of the gang culture. The gang areas became a breeding ground for the dealers. They'd be mobile in their cars. And what you've got to remember is that alcohol was dearer than drugs. So drugs was a cheap way of relaxation for people who were unemployed, and a handsome earner for people who were unemployed who were dealing on it. I can remember one old pensioner saying, you know, this was paradise when we came here in the 60s because we had our own toilets, fitted kitchens, back gardens. But unlike the slums of Glasgow, where pensioners could walk about freely and go about their business, we're in about 86 here. Pensioners daren't go out the door because they were getting mugged by the junkies.
The biggest issue we have is inequality. The biggest issue we have are whole communities detached, alienated, disconnected, and have been for a long time, through generations. We've got second and third generation of families that are wholly workless households. Sometimes these young men were everything they were ever going to be. And you know why? Because we told them that. We told them, you're just like your dad. You'll end up like your dad. You're a waster. You're useless. You're hopeless. You're whatever. We would say, people say that to kids. And what happens? They fulfill the expectations for themselves.
How common was knife crime among these gangs?
I think it would be several per week in those days, quite easily.
So people losing their lives on a regular basis because of a knife attack?
Most people in my generation would know somebody that lost their life to a gang fight.
Not far from here?
Oh, not far at all. Plenty of people on those pitches.
Coming up, the shocking reality behind Glasgow's knife crimes.
There have been murder victims who have been assaulted in the street, that people have been carrying machetes and indeed swords.
And how lives are impacted in the aftermath.
Just went in, straight out, just cut the whole power out of my body and I just went down.
Over recent decades, Glasgow's established a reputation as a city of extreme violence. A powerful combination of drugs and warring gangs led to a murder rate more than double the national average, with the knife becoming the weapon of choice. The city's housing estates, built in the hope of providing a solution to the poverty and deprivation of the slums, only helped feed the problems of gang violence as youths grouped together to protect their territory. Two areas that have been particularly affected over the years are the districts of Govan and Cardonald. Both lie near the banks of the River Clyde. Local youth workers like Johnny Hendry are trying to prevent the effects of knife crime by tackling their cause.
There's various reasons why a young person will decide to join a gang. It's basically protection, friendship, status.
Johnny is a familiar face on the streets of Govan as he tries to engage with youngsters involved with the area's numerous gangs.
This is Elder Park. It's quite a territorial area. You've got Young Linty, then you've got the Crossett Posse from down this area, then you've got the Govan team.
As with most street gangs, graffiti is used as a means of reinforcing perceived boundaries.
It's just marked that that's an area where they feel comfortable in. And it's just kind of status thing. It's somewhere that they know the territory they go, they feel safe. And obviously if other people from other areas come into it, that could lead to basically the kind of gang conflict.
Sometimes many of them carry knives for their own protection because they're aware of the fact that they live in very territorial areas, and that if they go out there without any form of protection, then they can easily become a victim.
One man all too familiar with the violent gang culture that's engulfed this part of the city is John.
This is where I grew up, part of Cardonald. Growing up here, it had its moments, There's quite a lot of surrounding gangs that used to do a lot of gang fighting.
He served more than 5 years in prison for 2 serious knife offences.
The first one I was defending myself, the second one was just a blackout. I don't even really know what I'd done until after it. Through the court case, bits and that came back, but the second one I had to ask what I was in for.
John's violent offences are a story familiar to many young men on Glasgow's streets.
The boredom comes, the drinking comes, and the drugs come, and then, I don't know, nice, I've always been a way of life in Glasgow, I suppose. Some people just take it out with them, like they take their keys out with them.
John has now done his best to turn his life around. He volunteers at Sunny Govan, a local community radio station, in the hope he can help others avoid his path.
I've always got criminal convictions, including my... Since I've been out, I've just been keeping out of trouble, just trying to do positive things, bit of structure in my life, and just rebuilding my relationships with my family, friends.
The destructive consequences that knife crime can bring on both the personal and city-wide level is one that Glasgow's doctors and surgeons have had to become depressingly familiar with.
I think the burden and the cost of some of these injuries can be very, very massive. There's the personal cost to the individuals, both financial, emotional and physical, some of whom spend their whole lives out of work as a result of their injuries. So there's a personal cost. Then there's the cost to the families of those people as well, which is huge. Wider society is affected. There's a huge cost to the NHS. At the moment, about 80% of our trauma cases are as a result of interpersonal violence. Knife crime involves a variety of different types of injuries. Commonly in Glasgow, slashing with a razor blade or a Stanley knife is not an unusual injury, and that tends to cause significant facial scarring, can sever major nerves in the face.
Even when lives can be saved after a violent knife attack, the cost to those affected can be life-changing.
A young man with a scar on his face will live with that forever. It'll affect his relationships. It'll affect how people treat him. It'll affect how he gets on with people because he'll react to that. It'll affect the job that he gets. He won't get a job carrying bags at a 4-star hotel with a scar on his face. And yet, if someone has a scar on their face, it means they're a victim.
And for innocent victims caught up in the senseless violence, the knife attack can prove only just the beginning of a lifetime of pain.
This is where it happened, right about here.
Stephen Hughes was using a cash point in the city when he was the target of a random attack.
So it chased me all the way up to just over where one of the cars were over there. And next thing he's at me, then he unzips his jacket and pulls out a knife and stabs me on the side. So I fell off my bike onto my left side, turned around to try and kick him, and they stabbed me twice behind my knee. So I got up and ran to John Galt House over there and banged on the door to try and get help, and I passed out. Your life just flashes right past. So it does. Your whole life flashes that quick, and it's scary. Especially when you see the amount of blood coming out your body, and you're like, wow, that's not real happening. When it happened to me, I was scared. I didn't want to die.
Stephen is hoping to get a new artificial leg so he can walk again, but the road to recovery is going to be a long and painful one.
It still hurts to this day. I try to do it my way, and he ruined my life. Now I've got to try and rebuild it from scratch.
And he has some strong words of advice for anyone looking to arm themselves on Glasgow's streets.
Don't use a knife, because you're going to end up, you're going to end up causing this to somebody through stabbings, or you're going to end up killing somebody. You end up in the jail, 10 time for murder. What's the point for just carrying a stupid fun knife? I'll never get over it. I'm scared the rest of my life.
Sadly, stories like Stephen's are not unique in Glasgow. Dr. Michael Murray has witnessed firsthand how a sharp blade refuses to discriminate in its damage, regardless of where it lands.
The painter and decorator was working at someone's home, had been paid for it on a Friday night, gone in to get a fish supper on the way home. Someone saw the money in his wallet and basically mugged him outside by stabbing him in the buttock with a knife to take his wallet. But in doing so, he cut the major artery that runs down the back of the leg, and he bled to death within about 3-4 minutes.
The stark reality of the lethal damage a knife wound can cause is one that pathologists working in Glasgow's morgues are also keen to share.
Tell me about the injuries you've seen from knife crime.
As a forensic pathologist, we see many victims of knife crime that majority will die from a single stab wound. Mainly a fatal wound will be to the area of the chest. However, I've seen people dying from a single stab wound to virtually any part of the body. Certainly stab wounds to the face, arms, legs, buttocks, all can result in a fatal outcome.
One of the biggest problems facing police in reducing knife attacks is the fact these weapons are so readily available. Many commonly found blades in homes up and down the UK also have the potential to become a lethal weapon.
Marjorie, you've kindly given us the use of one of your post-mortem tables to show you what I bought on my little shopping trip in Glasgow today. I got 10 knives, all in one go, from a local supermarket. No questions asked. This one, self-service at a hardware store. How lethal are these weapons?
Every single one is potentially lethal. Anything that has the ability to point and penetrate the body. Screwdrivers, broken shafts of golf clubs, anything that can puncture through the skin can kill.
Anyone could walk around with that in their pocket, couldn't they? Is that really going to kill someone?
That's not going to penetrate your heart, but a slashing type motion where you've got a major blood vessel close to the skin in the neck and you can bleed to death from a single blow with that. There have been murder victims who've been assaulted in the street, that people have been carrying machetes and indeed swords in the west of Scotland.
Swords?
Yeah, and we will see small numbers, but people who have been stabbed and died as a result of slashes and stab wounds with swords.
So you had to do a post-mortem of someone who died of a sword wound?
Yeah.
It's hard to get your head around sometimes.
It is, and why does anyone have a sword? But they have ornamental daggers and swords on some walls in the west of Scotland.
Coming up, how families are torn apart by knife crime.
You can't eat, you can't sleep. A lad been murdered.
And after years of violence on the streets, how the community is fighting back.
Let's do the things that work and no do the things that don't work.
Glasgow, a city that in recent years has gained a reputation as the most violent in the United Kingdom. A combination of poverty, deprivation and a rise in street gangs fighting running battles over their territories has led to a dramatic increase in the number of stabbings in the city. Glasgow became known as the murder capital of Western Europe, a title it's found hard to shake as the number of victims grew.
Knife crime can have a devastating effect, not just on the victim, but on families, friends and sometimes whole communities.
Sheena Folds is one of the many Glaswegian mothers whose life has been torn apart by violence. She's lost both of her sons to knife attacks.
I met David in 1995, 21st of July. David had a house with his partner, Tracy. Tracy was due Jordan in the August. And they never even seen him.
David was just 18 years old when he fell victim to the city's gang culture.
I just get home. Within 20 minutes I had the phone call that David had been stabbed. I went down, David was lying in the street. He'd been stabbed by some boy from Gatharnock, rival gangs.
Tragically, 16 years later, Sheena received the shocking news that her second son, Billy, had also been stabbed.
We got a phone call stating that something had happened, we had to come home. And that's what it was. Billy had been murdered. The day it happened was the 5th of November. It was bonfire night. They had went to the bonfire and there was, I think there was about 50 people at the bonfire as far as I heard, maybe more. And I heard that one of the boys said something about we're going to have Billy or something. And they were all laughing about it. He'd been stabbed 31 times, his heart was halved in two. So he didn't stand a chance. There was no reason for that. God, human beings shouldn't be doing that to other people. Once was enough, but twice, that's my full family. I haven't even got a family now. Does they leave you? Your heart's just like a big bad wire and it just keeps getting tighter and tighter. So it does. And you've got, you see their pals growing up and walk round the corner and they should be with them. It's just unbelievable, that's for us.
In Glasgow, the gang violence escalated significantly after the introduction of drugs on the streets, with rivals fighting for the right to control both supply and distribution. But there's another more readily available stimulant that arguably has an even greater effect on those who take it: alcohol.
I think alcohol plays a huge part in Glasgow, particularly where young guys that are out on the streets are maybe sharing a bottle of Buckfast. You know, they're still quite immature and their bodies aren't fully developed, and that alcohol has a huge impact on them, more than they realise, and I think it fuels aggression.
About 88% of violence is related to alcohol, so if you have more people drinking more, you have more violence. It's one of the, inexcusable links.
As a youth worker in Govan, Johnny Hendry regularly sees the damaging effects alcohol's having on his community.
Youngsters will start drinking alcohol from the age of 14 because it's easy to drink. So it's targeted for young people. It's leading on to the cider, it's leading on to the wine. And you can just see by what's down there. I mean, that's the proof of the matter, that's what's happening. The law is allowing our young people to get hold of that cheap alcohol. I mean, it's absolutely, it's destroying them physically, mentally. Sometimes it's destroying their employability. They won't be able to go for a job. They can't have a relationship. Everything's breaking down.
If alcohol didn't exist and you introduced it and said, for every £1 you get in tax, you will spend £2 cleaning up the mess, and it rots your brain, might kill you, might make you depressed, is involved in most house fires, road accidents, murders, violence, and 90% of people in prison, you would possibly think this wouldn't be a great idea to introduce.
This is happening all over Glasgow. It's not just happening in Govan. The amount of crime that happens and it's all alcohol related, it's incredible, and it's just wrong, morally wrong, and the law needs to change. We need to start looking at safeguarding our young people from this.
Alcohol, absolutely, that's the drug that we've been blindsided by, because we think it's okay because we drink as well. We can speak about heroin and say that's dreadful, those people who take heroin, because we don't. We can say it's dreadful, those people that take cocaine, because we don't. But because we take alcohol, we think, I feel a bit uncomfortable saying that. I don't think anyone has an absolute right to drink. I think some people should be banned from drinking.
As a former police officer, John Carnacan has seen the city during some of its most turbulent years, when alcohol, drugs and gangs all combined to create a very violent cocktail.
When I was a detective sergeant working in Easterhouse, which would have been late 80s, gang fights were every weekend. We used to call Saturdays and Sundays brown bag days, because the night shifter on duty dealt with all the violence. And if you had blood-stained clothing, it had to go in a brown paper bag. You put it in a polythene bag, you couldn't use it for forensic evidence. We used to come in on a Saturday and Sunday morning and there'd be brown bags everywhere, brown bag days. There was almost a hierarchy of victims, where if it was a young guy in Easterhouse, and that's what's going to happen anyway, that's what happens out there, that's what these young people do out there. And I mean, it wasn't a conscious thing, and I never heard anybody saying, and we never treated any murder different from any other one, but there seemed to be that, why are we not outraged by this?
For John, it seemed the violence that was plaguing Glasgow's streets was becoming ingrained in the city's culture.
One day I got an investigation about an attempt murder, and we knew who we were looking for. I went to the house on the Saturday late morning, chapped the door. Mum was there, and I said, look, I'm looking for David. And she said, he's not in, Mr. Carnacan, come in and look. So I went in and had a look around, and I said, look, where is he? She said, I really don't know. I said, well, when did you last see him? She said, he left here last night about 6 o'clock to go gang fighting, and I haven't seen him since. That's that intergenerational stuff. And she said that is completely normal. And can I tell you something? I actually accepted it as normal as well.
It was clear to Strathclyde Police that it was time for a change, a radical new approach to tackling knife crime.
The levels of murder in Scotland compared to England and Wales were huge, with 3.5 times the number of murders using a knife than anywhere else in the UK. And that really startled us. We decided that we had to find a way of reducing the number of murders that we had. So we started the Violence Reduction Unit. We tried to look at violence in a different way.
The Violence Reduction Unit, or VRU, was set up by police in 2005. Its aim was to combat knife crime by working more closely with the local community, targeting not just the effects of violence, but its causes too.
It's linked to poverty, but it's not just lack of money. It's to do with violence, alienation. It's to do with connectedness or lack of connectedness.
The police worked alongside a range of social providers, social agencies, education, health, social work, and they very much placed an emphasis on prevention, early and effective intervention, education about knife carrying in schools and in youth agencies that have helped to educate young people more.
With education now playing a larger role, Strathclyde Police look to team up with those at the very sharp end of the problem.
When we started doing this, one of the first groups that we engaged with who saw the problem were doctors. So we said to doctors, okay, if you get somebody in for the second time in 2 years getting stitches out his face because he gets slashed or whatever, do you give him any advice about not getting into fights? So one doctor, particularly Christine Goodall, said, right, we need to do something about this, what can we do? So Christine, along with colleagues, set up Medics Against Violence. And what they do is they go into schools and they speak to school children about the impact of it on violence.
So what we've done is we've tried to come to people like yourselves, because often it's people like you, as you'll find out in the course of the talk, that are most prominently affected.
We're trying to speak to them hopefully before they get involved in violence, because a lot of kids around this age, sort of 14, 15, think that this is quite an attractive, glamorous thing to get involved with, and they maybe see older boys and girls running about with gangs and they think that maybe that would be for them. So we're trying to get to them before they get to the point where they think it's going to be something that they want to do.
Medics Against Violence are keen to share stories like that of Scott Breslin. He was just 16 when he was stabbed in the neck on a night out in Glasgow.
I was up with my friends at a party and I got a phone call and it got told that they were getting chased. So me and my mate Ginger Jim went outside to actually see what was happening. So we walked down to the end of the street, turned the corner, and there was a big gang of people. No got a clue who they were or anything like that. And one of them went to me, like, where are you fae? And that's pretty much, in Glasgow, that means that you're about to get a kicking. One of them pulled out a knife. Me and Jim tried to run. Jim fell. I picked him up and we carried on running. And just as we turned a corner, one of them ran up the side of me and kind of just stabbed me right in the side of the neck.
How big was the knife?
It was just a wee hand thing, I'm not really sure, probably about 2.5 inches. Just went in, straight out, and kind of what happened, it was just kind of, it just cut the power of me, like as if you cut like an electric switch. I just cut the whole power away from my body and I just went down.
Tell me where the knife went in and the damage that it did.
Well, I was stabbed on the right side of my neck. If you just look there at the side of my neck, it's just like a little scratch.
Just there?
Just there.
Okay.
It was that little hole that did all the damage, which kind of, well, didn't get it, paralysed me from the neck down, which basically means I've no movement below the level of injury. So I've no movement in my arms, my legs, and anything like that.
For Scott's dad, Mark, it was the call that every parent dreaded.
When did you first hear what had happened?
A phone call from, I think it was the police first of all, tell me Scott had been in an incident and I should go up to the southern base up there.
What was it like seeing your son lying there like that?
It was terrifying, real terrifying. It's just even frightening thinking back on it now. Still kind of raw, even. It's the last thing you expect to happen to your son when he's at a party.
As a consequence of his injury, Scott now requires care 24 hours a day.
I'm restricted to a wheelchair. I'm totally reliant on other people helping me from getting from my bed to my chair, getting up in the morning, getting showered, brush my teeth, everything that pretty much everybody takes for granted I've kind of lost due to being paralysed.
What do you think about the people who did what they did to Scott?
The punishment they got wasn't nowhere near harsh enough. Scott's got a life sentence.
Do you want to try this?
Aye, cheers. Cheers, that's enough.
What do you think about the person who took a large chunk of your future away from you?
I kind of don't really try and think of it that way. I just kind of look at that as that was one night in my life that's happened. I just need to try and get on with it. Just there's no point looking back, just look forward.
Despite the huge physical challenges, Scott has continued his studies at university.
That global business one.
That one?
Yeah.
Do you reckon you'll finish 3 years?
Yeah, I know I will. I don't really doubt that. As long as I don't fail.
So what did you think about the injuries?
He can't walk, he can't do the toilet, he can't do, he can't go and eat a bath himself, he can't go out with his friends and stuff.
In Glasgow, the kids running about in gangs range from probably about 9 up to maybe 17, 18. People probably will find that quite shocking that kids of that age are running about in gangs and getting involved in knife crime, but sadly that's the reality of it.
If a cop went in and said to school kids, don't carry knives, it's fine. But if a doctor gets in and said, here's the injuries that happen because of knives, this is the issue about violence, it's far more impactful.
So it's trying to instill a thought to stop the perfect storm, really, of being drunk, losing your temper and carrying a knife, because it can have devastating consequences incredibly easily without really meaning to.
Communities are now realising they don't have to have violence. They don't have to have gangs and violence. There is another way of doing it.
This new joined-up approach to tackling Glasgow's knife crime problem seems to be having a positive effect. Slowly but surely, violent crime is beginning to fall in the city, with levels of knife carrying now believed to be at their lowest levels in 30 years.
Let's do the things that work and not do the things that don't work. So, thousands more cops, more prisons. Why are we throwing more people in prison? I don't know, but it goes against the evidence. And it's to do with our need for retribution, where we speak about justice and what we actually mean is revenge, which is not something we can fulfill. We can't do that. What'll work? We start to engage young people, get them involved, divert them, try and get them to understand better about relationships and how they go on, give them better resilience, talk about their well-being and their wellness, don't talk about violence, and it'll start to happen. And that's what's happening in Glasgow.
Keep it close now, Dominic.
Coming up.
Stand right up, son. Shoulders to the ears. That's it. On the heels.
How one man's vision is helping turn the tide.
Oh, I'm keeping kids off the street here. We're doing things.
Glasgow, long tarnished as a city with a reputation for violence, where poverty, alcohol and lack of opportunity had combined to make it, infamously, the most violent city in the United Kingdom. A place where drugs became the currency for disaffected youths and where the knife had become the weapon of choice for the gangs that plagued the streets. But today the city's fighting back. Community groups have begun to tackle the problems that had blighted Glasgow in the past, in the hope that by offering young people an alternative to crime and gangs, it will result in a more peaceful and prosperous future. Alex Richardson had shown me around the Easterhouse area of the city where he'd grown up. It was a childhood dominated by the presence of gangs. Today, in order to break this cycle, Alex has set up the Gladiator programme.
You've got to get the hips through. I was a competitive weightlifter training for my coal cellar, and a few younger youths in the street wanted to know if they could learn.
Alex's ambition is to get local kids to value themselves through exercise, discipline and competition. It's an approach that's already paying dividends.
And do you think it's teaching you other things other than how to be good at weightlifting?
It teaches me discipline. Like in school, somebody annoys you, you just ignore them, and that's the discipline of weightlifting, because when you're lifting weights, you've got to focus.
What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't weightlifting in this gym?
Probably hanging about with all my friends, but they all go out and they smoke and they drink, so it's not really a good place to be. Whether I'm here, it keeps me off the streets.
What do you think would happen if this place wasn't here to kids your age in the community?
More people would be out drinking and gang fighting and that.
So without this place, what is there?
Nothing. It's just a life that's ruined for you because everybody else is ruining it by gang fighting and that.
What makes you different from your mates who are out there fighting and causing trouble? What makes you think about things differently?
Well, I think about the future, and I think about when I'm older, I don't want to be in jail. I want to be having a good job. I want to get all my exams.
Do you think that if you didn't have this place, there'd be less of a chance of you doing that?
Yep. This is inspiring to stop you from fighting because you think, oh, I'm angry, I'll go up and train.
Social responsibilities come with like a few years later when you realise, oh, I'm keeping kids off the street here, we're doing things. Right, Dominic, come on, son, BB! The East End of Glasgow has not just been tagged the murder capital of Western Europe. The lowest life expectancy rate in Western Europe. Through child obesity with direct links to child poverty. So basically, the whole ethos of the Gladiator charity, getting the kids fit and healthy through physical activity, play. Resisting and doing what I tell you doing. Straighten the legs, own line, big chest, big chest, big chest.
Watching Alex work with his unique coaching style,
Okay, that's you finished. That's it, no more.
it's hard not to believe that with people like him, with such a passion to bring change to the city, Glasgow might have a fighting chance to shrug off its violent reputation.
Come on, 80 kilos! 180 pounds, let's go!
Now when you go into Easter House, nobody talks about gangs, and it's very much downplayed, and it's an unusual occurrence if you hear anything to do with a gang fight.
It seems to be a much safer city. The statistics suggest that the level of violence has reduced. That's not to say it's great, it's still worse than anywhere else in the UK, and we've still got a long way to go.
All the other cities in Britain are now dealing with the problems that Glasgow first faced 60 years ago. And it happened maybe 20 years ago in the other cities in Britain. And we're not saying that we've got all the cures in Glasgow. What we are saying is, we've had a lot more years to try and come to terms and come up with solutions for it.
But Glasgow's reputation as Britain's crime capital of knife violence, developed over several hard-worn decades of poverty and deprivation, is clearly one that's going to need a team effort to cure.
The next challenge now is we need to get these young men jobs. We need to make sure these young men are occupied, that they live the rest of their lives well. We've stopped them right now and helped them and diverted them a bit. But it's not something you can do, let's do that this weekend and move on to something else next weekend.
You're seeing new modern housing here, but you can be poor in a modern house. The same social problems that ate into the fabric of the old housing stock are still lying there beneath the surface. Shell Shoot Bob has his roof over his head. To him, going out mugging people is like a form of entertainment, like you're going for a meal and going to the cinema. At the end of the day, there's no the same human need here, so you've got to conclude, we kill for boredom, we kill for fun.
Progress is clearly being made in Glasgow, but with the recent economic hardships that have swept across Britain's cities since the recession, there's a concern that much of the good work might soon become undone.
The biggest worry is austerity is going to take us back 20 years because we won't have the tools to address the problems.
So what you're saying is things are going to get worse?
Your 8-year-old kid of today is your 6 years' time is your 14-year-old problem of tomorrow. If you don't have positive opportunities for that kid right now. So that's got to be last down the priority. But that's the link that will lead to anarchy coming back in the long term.
Here in Glasgow, I've found plenty of voices, all offering very different perspectives on the city's very particular problem.
It's hard to know how Glasgow's going to deal with knife crime definitively, why you still have young people going out carrying knives and the damage that they're doing to each other. It's frankly depressing how pervasive it is.
But in a city that seems at times to be a prisoner of its violent past, there does feel like there's enough people working hard for change to provide a sense of optimism for the future. From the police, who are targeting prevention, from medical professionals who work on education, and from community groups who are offering an alternative to the violence of the gangs.
Do I think Glasgow and Scotland's a better place than it was 10 years ago in relation to violence and knife crime? Absolutely, without any shadow of a doubt, by any measure. In 10 years' time, come back, as I'll be able to tell you it's even better, and I'm convinced of that.
Next on Channel 5, the last ever season of The Mentalist continues, with Lisbon in the line of fire and Jane feeling very protective.